And better looking. I hear what you're saying. Right. Good evening, everybody. I'm not Chris Baines. Sorry. So I've come prepared. Now, I can only really see out of one eye. That's okay. I didn't really measure Chris's head earlier, but here we go. Somebody point me towards the slides. Here we go. Now, I may have only... Can you still hear me okay? I can speak like this. Here we go. I may have only seen these slides at lunchtime, and I may have been drunk during the Google I/O session where Chris presented this the first time. So, we're all on a great roller coaster ride together. Here you go. So we'll see. In fact, you know what? Let's just put this here. We'll just rest out there. You can pretend Chris is with us in spirits. That's his GitHub profile photo. I think I couldn't find a better photo of Chris, so that was the only one. Anyway, so I'm going to be talking about dark theme and gesture navigation this evening. Let's go straight into it. So this is obviously one of the big hot topics at Google I/O this year. So dark theme is now a thing on Android. Yay! Let's go into why we'd want to use dark theme. So there's a couple of scenarios where dark theme for an app or for an operating system as a whole is a useful thing to have. Firstly, the environment that you're in. So maybe you're kind of using your phone in bed, having a bright white light shining in your eyes probably isn't great. Again, if you're driving a car at night, having a big, kind of display sitting there blinding you isn't great. Maybe you're in a cinema pirating movies and you don't want people to know. Dark mode would be a great thing for that kind of thing. Battery. There's an animation here. Here we go. So Google in their analysis of using dark mode on a device can see up to 60% battery savings, which is pretty significant. So dark mode is great for extending battery life. And accessibility. So obviously sort of high contrast displays and color schemes and stuff are great for sort of accessibility reasons as well. So those are kind of three really good ideas of why you might want to do dark mode inside your app. And there's a new system setting to let you change into dark mode. Obviously, having the ability to switch is pretty cool. So there's a system setting so you can choose between dark and light, and there's a navigation component, a notification shade component as well to switch between light and dark themes. So Google obviously strongly recommend that going forward we actually add dark themes into our apps. These days it'd be a shame to have dark mode enabled and only one of your apps kind of changes to dark mode, and the other one is still a kind of a bright light in your face. And obviously happy user versus confused user. I think that's the emoji for, or just drooling stroke victim one. Sorry, bad joke. It's not, that wasn't in the slides, by the way. I added that one in. It's not Chris's fault. So you can force kind of a dark theme inside your app, inside Q. So we can do that, and the system will automatically generate sort of an inverse of the app for you. So you can kind of get it for free, but it's not going to be great, but it's going to be free. So you don't have to do too much work. And you can do that by saying force dark theme allowed equals true in your style. So a one-line thing there, and it'll allow your app to be forced into dark mode. And with the force dark mode on the left and the custom kind of implementation on the right, which we'll get into in a second, you can kind of see that maybe the fab button here at the bottom on the left isn't great, and the sort of the widget at the top for the dates doesn't look particularly fantastic. It doesn't maybe match your color or your theme guidelines. So the inverse, the automatic one, isn't great. So obviously you want to do a custom one if you want to have a finer control over what the dark theme looks like, and then you can choose your brand colors for those dark theme setups. And hopefully, or maybe some of you have had like a day-night theme in your app for a while, because it's been around since API 4.0, Android 4.0 API 14. So you can use the -night qualifier on your resources directory to provide a separate theme for night mode, which then becomes your dark theme. So that's really handy. So if you've already done that, a lot of the hard work is already out of the way. So congratulations and well done. You're the best. And again here, so we've got some styling things. So we're going to change from app compat day 9 mode to material components day and night mode. I don't know why that is. So yes, so that's going to be better if you do that. So here you can see with our value themes. So the first one, we've got the day-night mode, and in the values folder, we're just going to use the app-compat light theme, and then in the values-night folder, we're going to change our sort of base theme to be the app-compat one. So that's going to be like the dark version of the app-compat theming system. So you can see how we're going to switch between the two. So it's quite an easy setup to kind of set your base theme to switch between day and night and dark mode by just changing the base, the parent class of your themes. And then apparently you need to tell the app when to use or to use the system settings to kind of honor this kind of setup for the day and night mode. So previously you could have day and night mode set up based on a time of the day. So it's sort of like 11 o'clock at night, it would automatically kick in because it's bound to be nighttime at that time of day. Probably doesn't work in the northern hemisphere like Norway because it's daylight for 24 hours. So here you can kind of have it set now by the operating system. When you kind of switch into dark mode, you can say, look, just switch into dark mode and just switch to the night theme when it could be the middle of the day if you want to have the dark theme on because you're in the cinema or somewhere else. So these are the different kind of mode types you can have. Probably self-explanatory. So night mode, yes, means always use the dark theme. This is what it's going to look like. Night mode, no, don't use the dark theme. Pretty straightforward. Follow the system means if you change with that little notification widget, it's going to change between dark and light based on the system. And the final one, which is kind of new, is based on the battery. So if your battery is starting to run low, obviously if Google have seen big improvements in the battery lifespan using dark mode, when the battery is about to die, it's a great way to kind of save battery. I know there's battery saving options on some manufacturers' devices. This is just another way of extending the life of the battery when your system is running low on resources. There we go. So you can see on that slide, wherever we go. Sorry? So the red one is your battery is running low and it's gone to dark theme. And now when your battery is going green again, more battery, it's going to switch back because you've charged it up. It's magic, isn't it? These animations in Keynote are fantastic.
Just one question.
Oh, questions? Oh. He's not written the answers to the questions, I guarantee it. Go on.
Does your phone not show when you switch between dark and light?
Are you still on Android Q Beta 4 or something? Yeah, it'll be fixed in Beta 5. Oh no, sorry, we don't comment on future releases. Sorry, that's the... Yeah, ask Chris later. He'll be online. So what do we have? So the one that we talked about earlier with the auto night mode based on the time of day, that's kind of now deprecated. So try and avoid using that one. Just have the one that follows the system operating settings. And the fix and bugs. Who doesn't like bug fixes or animations with caterpillars? How do you? They recommend that inside your app, you might want to have a setting that lets you override the dark theme on a per app basis. So you might have an app, so the system might be set to dark mode currently, and you might go, actually, you know what, I want to watch YouTube in light mode for whatever reason, or maybe a navigation app. If your device is in dark mode, you want to be able to change on a per app basis. So there are some recommendations here for how you choose the theme depending on the OS version, because obviously the deprecation of the different settings you can have is going to matter. So on Android Q, they recommend you should have a light, a dark, and a system follow the system default. So obviously those are quite straightforward, light, dark, and whatever the OS is. And on Android P and before, because we don't have the kind of new follow the operating system one, because dark mode is only in Q, they've got the battery saver one, which is kind of, different. So it'll kick in when it's low battery, rather than when the system default changes, because there's no setting on P to do that. And just to highlight again the modes that we talked about earlier, dark, light, system default, and battery saver, those are the kind of constants you'll use when you want to set the setting from your settings screen. So force dark, here we go. This is fun. Let me get another drink. This is where it gets gnarly. Sorry? Dark force, yes. May the force be with you. So here we go. What does this one do? So you can force, as a sort of a developer option, the operating system in Q to be all dark. So you can kind of see today what your app might look like if you just went all dark without doing anything. So in this example here, we've got what it looks like normally on the left, and then with sort of forced dark mode on the right. So again, we talked about having like a custom theme where you go, okay, I actually want different colors based on my brand guidelines in dark mode. And there might be certain occasions, if you can imagine like a Twitter app. Here we go. So you've got like an example of an image view here. So a Twitter app, if you've got lots of images and stuff, you go, okay, force dark mode. It's going to take those images and kind of inverse them because it doesn't know that it's an image about a photograph. Perhaps it might think it's like an icon, and that icon can be inversed, like the share icon, for example. It might just go, okay, rather than having a white little triangle with 3 dots, I'm going to inverse that one. It doesn't know that the image on the Twitter feed is a photo. So you might sit there and go, okay, I'm the Twitter app. Don't allow the forced changing of photographs, because you go, okay, that's going to be a bit weird to have the inverse of a photo in the stream. So you can mark individual image views as please don't invert me automatically, even when I'm in kind of dark mode. So that's what that one is there. And apparently you can apply a tint. We'll have to ask Chris about that one later on. It's all good. And here you go. You can see the developer options to set the force dark. So yeah, if you go into the developer options, scroll down, there's one which lets you just change the whole operating system so you can see today what your app is going to look like and the whole OS. But yeah, don't switch that on as a regular thing. Just use the one in the system the system navigation drawer for regular day-to-day kind of use. Cool. That was dark theme. We escaped. Right, onto gesture navigation. The new hotness in Android Q. So here we've got some lovely animations about how gesture navigation might work. If any of you have played with the Android Q beta, you can kind of swipe from the bottom to kind of throw an app back to the app drawer. You can pause kind of halfway up to kind of then swipe through your recent history. And then you can swipe from the left or from the right edge of the screen to go back through the sort of back stack. So you can see on the third image there, as you drag out from the left-hand side, you get the little arrow that's going to say, hey, I'm about to do a back gesture here. So these are kind of the new gesture animations or navigation. And people are going, oh, okay, well, is the back button dead? Are we never going to see the back button again? I've coded a lot of stuff in my app around back buttons. What are we going to do? 3-button mode is going to be required forever. So you've got the pure gesture navigation stuff we just saw the demo of there, but the 3 navigation buttons at the bottom with the back, home, and recents will still persist. So don't worry, they're not going away. But obviously, gesture navigation has got some benefits in that you get more screen real estate going forward. So you get like a more immersive experience. Google thinks this is important because obviously different manufacturers are building, larger screen displays. Samsung devices go edge to edge and kind of wrap around the edge of the device as well. Different manufacturers are starting to think about different ways of doing gesture-based navigation, and Google have kind of jumped on this and said, look, we want to get this unified. We want to make it a decent experience for the user in terms of, if you switch to a different brand of phone, you don't have to relearn all the navigation gestures again. And also it's going to make things easier for developers when handling things like, well, what happens when you swipe from the very edge? I've got a navigation drawer on the left-hand side. What's going to go, what's going to go on there? So they want to kind of make sure that the implementation of gesture navigation is done right, and then hopefully all the manufacturers will kind of get that as part of the standard OS. So here we've got the different places where you can kind of perform gestures. So we've got the little blue arrow at the bottom there, which is kind of the up gesture, which might send you to the recents. You've got the 2 red arrows, which I kind of think like the back one, not the back one, the similar to the home, where you want to kind of throw the app back to the app drawer, and then the yellow ones on the side for doing the different back swipes. You can do it from the left side or the right-hand side, I guess for left-handed people and stuff, or if you want to do it one-handed on the train or something. Why they say, as I mentioned before, why are Google interested in doing gesture-based navigation? Is because then you get more screen real estate once you get the Chrome out of the way of the navigation drawer and the status bar to a certain extent. You've got more room for more content, whether you're a video streaming app or you're doing lists of bank details or whatever it might be. Going edge to edge just gives you that more immersive design and beautiful UI. Get rid of buttons and stuff like that. Other operating systems, if there are any, have also adopted similar patterns, I imagine. Again, so why are we doing it? We're talking about it now because Android Q is the thing, but Android Q is going to come out maybe in the next couple of months or so. Who knows? We don't comment on future releases here at Google. We want to get our app ready for when it does launch. So we need to kind of work out where those swipe gestures are going to come from and how we're going to handle some of those swipe gestures because we want to override some of those ones. So what is edge to edge? Asked Chris. So here you've got your kind of regular list view style app. This is kind of the bounds of your app. So you've got the navigation bar at the very bottom there in this gesture-based world. And you've got the red kind of bar at the top, which is the status bar. And we kind of start wanting to have to draw behind the status bar. The status bar is kind of just there to kind of tell us the time and how much battery you've got left. You kind of go, well, look, I can put content there, which is actually going to make things look a lot nicer. So they strongly recommend on Q that you kind of start going edge to edge at the top and drawing behind the status bar, and it's optional before Q. So this is what it might look like. You might have a photo or an image or a profile header or whatever it might be at the top of your content. So, make use of that status bar area, more gorgeous apps. So we've gone from this to this. So how do you implement it? So here we go. So for things like the navigation components at the bottom, and you probably can't see on the slides, but at the very bottom of the image there's a little horizontal bar, which is kind of like if you scrub left and right, you can switch between apps by swiping left and right. But it's a sort of a predefined color. And you go, well, hang on a sec, if it's kind of light gray and I scroll some content behind that, I'm not going to be able to see that little bar is there. So what the operating system automatically does is it looks at the color of the content behind it, and it will generate a color for the navigation component that's kind of like the inverse, or something that's got like a high contrast against that piece of content. So for free, you don't need to kind of sit there and stylize that little bar. It'll do it automatically. So the animation, if we go back and forward again, will it replay? Hopefully, maybe. Yes. So as the gesture scrolls down at the very bottom, it's a very thin line. You probably can't see it to the back. It kind of changes automatically from like a light gray to kind of a pale white. So that's kind of free. Ah, look at that. It zooms in. There you go. Who knew that was going to happen? It's almost like I haven't seen these slides before. There we go. Beautiful. Thank you, Chris, for zooming in on that slide. So next, what do we got? So we're recoloring system buttons. Okay. So that's what we just talked about with the stuff at the bottom. So going immersive, full screen. We want to set up some bits and pieces like the navigation bar at the bottom there, setting it to transparent. On older versions, you might want to sort of like Android P and below still have a background colors because you're going to have the 3 gesture buttons there in the background. So you want to have a background so they can stand out against it. And here you can set the system flags that are going to set the screen size to be full screen. So this is the full screen one. So insets. Okay, so cool stuff. So if you're going edge to edge with your content, you're going to sit there and want to inset some of your content by a little bit, because you don't want to have, let's say you've got a button at the top of the screen or a button at the bottom of the screen. FAB would be a classic example. You don't want to have that sitting so far down that it's going to be in the gesture area for like a home swipe. So window insets lets you ask the operating system, how big is that space at the bottom or the left or at the top? And then you can move your content up by that amount. So obviously if you're switching between the 3-button gesture navigation and the 3-button navigation and the gesture navigation, that height is going to be different. So your app can dynamically change based on what the user has set in their settings. So here you go. So we've got a fab at the bottom here. Oh, look at that, he's zoomed in as well. Brilliant. So we've got the little swipey section here where you can go left and right between the apps. We don't want our fab so low down on the screen that it's going to touch that area. So we can query those insets and say, look, how much should I set my bottom content up by? And the OS will tell you, and you can just move your fab the right amount. Again, when you go to the 3-button navigation model, it's going to move even further. So your fab isn't going to be obscured or clashing with the navigation components in this example, which is good. So system gestures. So again, new in queue, because obviously the navigation stuff is all new in queue. You want to be able to detect where on the left and right hand side of the screens a back gesture is going to kick in. So you don't want to put content in that gesture area, because then it's going to be competing with the system for what takes precedent, the navigation drawer or the back button, or the back swipe as it probably is now. So these are kind of the edges where the system navigation gestures are going to kick in. And here on the, so you might turn it off on the left-hand side there, because you go, okay, I've got a navigation drawer in my app, so I want to sit there and say, look, ignore any kind of gestures on that side. And again, you want to be out of the safe zone at the bottom. There are some gestures, here we go, there are some mandatory system gestures like the home one. You always want to be able to get out of an app. You can't kind of really keep people in as much as you'd like to keep them in your app. I'm sure it's great. But the home button, or the home gesture here is like a mandatory zone. You can't sit there and look, turn that bit off. You can't sit there and say, look, I don't want to detect gestures in that bottom, however many pixels it is. So that's always going to happen. So you can't kind of turn stuff off on the bottom edge. So system window insets lets you move clickable views from away from the edges. So that's the fab stuff. The system gesture insets, you can use it to turn off the bits. So let's say you've got a carousel and you want to be able to swipe through the carousel. You want to be able to maybe turn that off at the edges. And then there's some mandatory ones that you can't turn off at all. So overriding gestures. Here we go. So how do we do some of the overriding bits? So in the example we've got here, we've got a photo app. So you're going to resize some photos, and you've got 4 little drag handles on the corner of the photo there. So you've got the 4 little white dots. Obviously, those white dots are sort of really close to the edge of the screen there. They're actually in the zone for doing a back gesture. So you don't really want to have your app clashing with that gesture. So you can now override it, as we've talked about. Use it sparingly. So don't just turn off all edges, because then you've got like no back gesture. So just use it in the spots where you need it. So obviously your app knows where it's drawing these little drag handles. You can then tell the system as those drag handles move which parts of the of the edge of the screen you want to turn off the back gesture. So those 4 blue rectangles or blue squares are now not going to respond to the back gesture. They're going to respond to the drag handle on your image view. So you can sit there and say, look, these 4 corners here don't count as back if you swipe here. So again, as they say, use it sparingly and use it where it's kind of appropriate in this case. So how do you do it? So you've got a view here, maybe it's a custom view, and you can provide it a list of rectangles and say, look, these are where my drag handles are. Don't allow the back swipe gesture to happen in these places. And if you're writing a custom view, if you're changing the layout, or you're doing like a on draw in a canvas, as you kind of move these things around, these are the times when you can tell the operating system, hey, look, this drag handle is now moved. You handle it. You work out if the back gesture now no longer applies because it's moved out of that little yellow zone. There we go. That's the end. Wow. Who knew it'd be that quick? Yes, any questions? Chris is on Twitch, and I've got a beer. So yeah, if there's any questions, I'll try and answer them, because I was at the kind of the talk, but yeah, I'm no Chris Baines.